Good afternoon. My name is Robert Gaskamp. I'm founder of the IDnext platform and would like to welcome you on this IDnext Lunchbreak. It's going to be the last one before the summer will start. Before we're going into the presentation and the theme of today, I do have a short introduction to share, because for those who are attending the lunch break and maybe are not aware of IDnext itself, I think it's good to give you a brief introduction about IDnext. Which we are existing more than 10 years, an open independent platform, and the main idea that we have with this platform is to support and facilitate approaches in the world of digital identity. We do this in different ways to create awareness about digital identity, and I certainly think with the last year with COVID, some things really has this acceleration in this area, but also, and it's the main goal, also the part of this lunch break, to provide a knowledge and network platform for experts in the world of digital identity. One of the things that we do in order to create awareness and also share the knowledge and experience is to organize specific events or lunch breaks. In this case, lunch breaks, which we have organized due also to the pandemic where we are, but also in a way to also spread our message to our community. And that's our main mission, sharing knowledge. So that's why we're introducing the IDnext lunch break. So that means during your lunch break, where you have to arrange your own lunch, we have one team, we have, well, in this case, 2 guests, and certainly some interesting content to share. We also do other things and other events that we organize, and I would like to pay attention to our annual event that's going to take place on the 11th and 12th October later this year. It's going to be a physical event, so I'm not sure how it is about you, but I'm really aching for meeting people in person and to discuss the different topics regarding digital identity. More information is available on our website. Subscription has been started already, and the main theme of this year really is about identity matters. I think that's also what we have seen the last year, that really identity matters, especially in specific situations like the pandemic that we currently have. So this was the introduction from my end, but I think, mostly important is our lunch break of today, where we do have Rabo, together with Aegon, are going to, let's say, share the vision that trust serves as the base of collaboration. So Olaf and Karel will give the presentation. I think it's good to tell that if you have any questions, please raise your hand in the Teams. Certainly, I and Susanne will monitor the questions. We'll see when we can answer them. Let's also make it interactive, but also give Olaf and Karel the time to do the session. And certainly there will be time afterwards also to do any Q&A. So if there aren't any questions, Olaf, Karel, who's going to start?
Yeah, I will start. Thank you, Robert. Well, again, thank you very much for joining this lunch break session. On behalf of Rabobank and Aegon, delighted to have you all on the call for this lunch. What we will discuss today, as Robert will said, what we will discuss today is the following topic: Rabobank and the vision that trust serves as the basis for a collaboration. It's a mouthful of words, but it's also a very well dependent and interesting topic to talk more about. So if I move on directly to the next slide, some key topics that we highlight for you that you will, 3 learnings that we will discuss are actually, 2 competitors, as we are in fact, working together. What are the keys for future collaboration? Trust as an additional digital asset for the consumers. Financial collaboration is based on trust, and the learnings of Aegon when implementing the customer journeys involving IDIN boarding and logging together with Rabo Identity Services and Signicat as a partner, as a proxy, as an intermediary. But before we start that, let me first introduce who will be presenting. My name is Olaf Thomas. I'm working for Rabobank as a business development manager within B2B services. And at B2B services, we are working in 3 different areas. That is payments, identity services, and open banking. And just to clarify, open banking in this case, it means that we offer customers more room to bank the way they want to bank. And together with partners, we support the innovation of financial products and services in that way. And coming back to the three domains, payments, identity, and open banking, by putting these together, we at Rabobank are able to develop, well, solid products for our customers and create smooth customer journeys, so to say. Next to that, a little bit about myself, a little bit more. I have a background in licensing for 10 years within Microsoft before, and financing, coming from DLL and GE Capital. And next to that, I'm married, 3 children between the ages of 6 and 12. So they're not at home right now, so it's not going to be a sensation, but it can be sometimes. Some small additional note. After this session, when you are interested to know more about our solutions, please let me know and send me an email. That's why it's stated in here. It stands out in here in the slide. That's for now. It's about me. My co-host this afternoon is Karel. Karel, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, I got the children here sitting at the kitchen table. So for me, it's also interesting how it works working from home. I'm coming from the business-to-business marketing side and ended up at Aegon, and the last 7-8 years I've been working on, well, providing access to our portals at Aegon, not only for the advisors and employees, which is business to business, but also for business to consumer. And well, I got a background as a chemical engineer. That's interesting, but that is just a fact and not necessarily an asset on the identity market. And Olaf, please continue.
Thank you very much, Karel. The agenda for this afternoon. In the next slides, we will discuss more about Rabo Identity Services. I will discuss that. Karel then takes over and we'll talk about the trust, some facts and figures, always good to know, and more importantly about Aegon and IDIN together. And we will close this session by giving you some time to ask questions as well in between or afterwards, which hopefully Karel and I will be able to answer. And if not, we will come back to that later. Okay, first of all, this is something we always show, but it's of course, obviously, everyone wants to work online or to be able to work online in these days. It's increasing rapidly, especially during last year. And with Rabo Identity Services, we help customers to digitalize and transform their customer journey, so to say, their online customer journey. And Rabo Identity Services, what does it mean and what does it do? Well, it's an identity platform and it offers various online services for login, identification, validation, and signing. And with these services, you're able to optimize your customer process, resulting in a smoother customer journey, so to say. And all of these services are not predominantly together, but can be apart from each other, available within the identity platform, and can be integrated within your back office system, so to say, through one single API connection. Although I think most of you know what an API is, but still the acronym stands for the Application Programming Interface, which is an intermediate that allows two applications to talk to each other. And in this case, by using the API, the exact approach you would like to use a service for is, well, adjustable to your own required design, so to say. So it's flexible. And the response that the API has collected will consist of various information, but including data. For example, in validation services, it's matching results, or it can also include copies of source documents, so to say. I would like to highlight two of these services in specific. First one is IDIN, and Karel will discuss this one later as well, but just let me now say what it is and how it can be used. Well, the technique that we use at Rabobank to move money or to get money from A to B securely can also be used to determine someone's identity. With IDIN, customers use these familiar and secure environments they know from their bank, and they can log in, for example, to a website or to a My Domain website without using a username or password. They can identify themselves using their own data, which has been checked by the bank, and they can sign documents easily and securely. And the attributes that IDIN is able to provide is, as you can see on the right side, is name, home address, date of birth, or age indication. You can think of now like the new laws coming for alcohol as 1st of July. So you need to know if someone's above 18 or not. And next to that, email address or phone number can be provided. So these are all services with IDIN. And again, Karel will talk more in depth about it later. The other service that I would like to highlight is digital signing. This service can be used in various ways, dependent on the legal value of an agreement or document, and also dependent on the security level of the signature. So with Rabo Identity Services, we offer a simple signature, for example, with an ink sign or an SMS one-time password or email one-time password, and an advanced signature, according to the EIDA standards, in combination with IDIN. An advanced electronic signature is a signature which is, well, actually uniquely linked to and capable of identifying the signatory, so the one actually signed, which is created in a way that allows the signatory to retain control. And also, it is linked to the document in a way that any subsequent change of the data is detectable. Very important. So next to an agreement that can be signed, it actually can be signed by multiple people, as also said on the slide. And also the order of signing can be, well, can be found. You can choose your own order to sign. So if there are at this moment not any questions, I would like to give the floor to Karel and talk more about the Aegon and their experiences with Rabo Identity Services.
Welcome. Our journey at Aegon with Rabobank e-business Signicat started already long time ago. 4 years in digital transformation is quite a long time. And we at Aegon had not a problem, but what we were doing is that every time that somebody wanted to access a Mijn Aegon account or recreate a Mijn Aegon account, we were sending the letters with beautiful codes to the house addresses of our customers. So I came as a digital old guy already, because I started at Swiss Life in 1995 as the guy who had glasses and who was the one who was starting with internet. My itch was that we were sending so many letters, and that was also the base of our starting with IDIN. So we a long time ago we set up a authentication with IDIN, which is validated, verified into our own data, and if those data match, somebody could set up his internet or his Mijn Aegon account. First, I want to take you into one little base of, let's call it theory. Working in identities for the last 8 years, still there is some kind of a big, not a mess, but everybody puts everything on the same table. And my experience the last years is that there is a difference between identity management for business to business, for business to consumer, machine to machine, and also for internal IAM, employee identity and access management. Those structures are different. I got a lot of things to explain internally, mostly that the structures we created to identify our own employees and how to register, but also how the entitlement for all kind of cloud applications is organized. That is really something you cannot impose on consumers, for example. If you have a business-to-business collaboration working together, you are always thinking in contracts and specific entitlements, but also into delegated user management, because you don't know who is working for the independent advisor. So you have to create specific kind of structures in that IAM world. So there are 4 IAM triangles, and those 4 triangles require a different approach, especially from the view who is dealing with the identity. So a consumer needs to have a easy to use, clear and understandable flow journey before he's entering, for example, our portals. For example, what you see currently, it's a thing in business to business to use e-herkenning. DigiD is not e-herkenning, like, for example, IDIN is not DigiD. And what I want to emphasize with this is that everybody's also thinking that those are the same structures, but they are different identity services providing different needs. So let's put a focus on C-IAM. When I started, I wanted to provide our customers the most easy flow to board into my Aegon or to log in into my Aegon. So on a very early stage, we started to experiment with, for example, Facebook and LinkedIn as a intermediate identity service. We also believed in an early stage that, for example, Dapper could be an identity service providing a very secure way of authenticate a customer. And to rephrase the thing, these are all things aimed on the consumer, but all those schemes are not the same. They got different purposes and different things. But what we experienced, for example, with Facebook is that the user in a certain way did not trust it. And also, of course, all kind of Aegon compliance services did not trust the Facebook as a mean of authentication. So I was very lucky that in an early stage we had already the second factor on our app for Facebook at the point that the media reached out of in the media Facebook was, let's call it, had a bad reputation at a certain point. I was very lucky that we constructed something with multi-factor already on Facebook before letting people in. But the importance of starting with those schemes and trying at least, for example, Dapper, we had a very interesting attempt to get it running, and the only thing is nobody, but really nobody, was using Dapper in the Netherlands to authenticate himself, except our functional manager Eric van der Meulen, who was proudly the only user of Dapper for months trying to get into my Aegon account. From all these schemes, you see that we are working together with DigiD. It's an imposed thing, and we are working together right now with IDIN. Started with a boarding flow, because at that time the login was still very, let's call it, costly. And lately, last year, we are also using IDIN as a login method. For example, a login method, I thought nobody would use his bank account to just log in. But to my surprise, we are right now doing more than 30,000 IDIN logins a month, which is, I think, very, it's expensive for us. I have to find a way to see that costs delivered somewhere in Aegon. But it's also a signal that IDIN as a method for login or for authentication has got a growing potential and is still getting more and more accepted by the consumer as a very trustful mean. And I mean with trustful, I mean that what we saw the last 4 years is that IDIN is, in the start, people were a little bit hesitated to use it. Why should we use it? Is it trustful to use it? Because nobody at that time knew IDIN. And that has turned on that also the consumers, they have moved from the difficulties which are in your logging in with your bank things to this is a very secure way to log in. Why is IDIN currently winning? If you see the experiments we did with Facebook and LinkedIn showed that the consumers are not using those platforms, or they don't trust to get their data to, and are not willing to share their data from Facebook with other entities. And what we learned is that a brand of IDIN together with a brand of Aegon is a trusted relation for the user. And they are, the consumers are perceiving, and that's what we see from our UX testing the last year. They perceive that we are working proper and secure, and that we are not doing something with the data that they don't want. And that is, for example, Facebook. Nobody trusts them anymore. People think that Facebook is doing things with your data, and they're doing things with your data because the advertisements I get are strongly connected to what I want. But you see that the consumer is looking for a trustful bond, and IDIN and Aegon are providing that. It's a fragile bond. You don't have to play with it, and that's, for example, one of the things we implemented. We are not using the attributes of IDIN. We are not storing the data provided, and we are only validated it against our own data. The consumer awareness is something that has grown the last 4 years. We started with IDIN when really it was an unknown instrument. That was the acceptance, and that was also proved by consumer testing. Nobody knew what IDIN was. They only saw it as something like Ideal, which was already accepted. But the idea of providing your identity by a, let's say, broker, when we started 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, it was not. It was something confusing, something scary, something shabby. I want to not say, and you had to convince the consumer to use it. And what you see is that because it was so close to Ideal, because it was accepted that the banks are trustful relations, the last few years, IDIN is quickly accepted and adapted by the consumers to use it. It's incredible how people stepped over the fuzzy earlier stage. I will provide some figures. Please don't send everything to everyone, of course, because you can see what the business case is about. What a good guitar player. He looks good, Marco. You see, that's my Ibanez Roadster too. What I want to prove with these figures, those come out of our Power BI system, is that we got 2 ways for boarding. Login is a different thing, but these are the figures of boarding. People who activate their account, which is somebody who has not an active account, activates his account. And new customers who are creating their accounts. I can explain why there's such a difference, but what you see is that in the early stage, when we started, the big bulb is the period in the beginning. A lot of people did not have an active account, so they are starting to use, and instead of sending them letters with codes, we started to provide a possibility to use IDIN. I hope that everybody is known how it works. I deliberately took out all the sheets providing our customer journey, but you end up on a login page. If you don't have an account, you can create your account, and then you preferably there's a choice, but you still have to get a letter, or somebody will pass through the IDIN scheme. What you see, we had a very large peak in the early days, and then it was very, let's call it a smooth period during the day. For you, also the time when people start to come to Aegon is, of course, when they need to fill in the tax forms. So we got 1 million pension users who need their factor A, and you have the mortgage people who need the input for the for their tax forms. So that's for us also always a very high volume time in the spring until the 1st of April, or nowadays the 1st of May. I wanted to highlight this. So the first trend is 1 year ago. That's a very peak in the early page, and you see a smaller peak this year. Was DigiDay not good enough? The problem, that's an interesting question. DigiDay came later, and we are using DigiDay. We are obliged to use DigiDay because we are a pension provider. To be honest, DigiDay is far more expensive. So every time somebody uses DigiDay, for us, it's a very costly operation. And for consumers, it's unhandy because they only see their pension. For us, it's unhandy because we had to create a second kind of entrance and trying to separate all the pension products from the insurance and the mortgage and the life products, which finally, after hard work, we had a portal created where all the products were visible for the consumer. So before implementing DigiDay, which we implemented last year, we had to recreate, we had to create a way that only pension would be visible for a customer who also had different products. So that was a very complicated thing. I come on later on DigiDay. What you see is that the peak of the IDIN usage is less big than 1 year ago. And the interesting part why I'm showing it, this was the early days of COVID, of the COVID epidemic. And we saw a huge rise of users the last period. Suddenly, everybody was coming to the, and to give you an insight, in 2019, we had 2 million visitors coming to our portal. But last year in 2020, it was more than 6 million. It was an incredible rise of visits. It's not unique users of visits to our portal. So the COVID effect delivered a lot of value to the business case, because we had a lot of people who created their digitally their accounts by IDIN and not sending letters, because my thing is, of course, I don't want to cut trees for distributing activation codes to our customers. What you see is, when we started, we thought that the IDIN account unlock would be a one-shot, because somebody would create this account and then use that account often because it was created. But what you see is that the numbers of IDIN users are still growing, and for me that's unexpected, because the base of customers for Aegon is not growing hard that we had 300,000 new customers this year. But what I expect is that, of course, people forget their password and usernames, and they are using the account activation more as some kind of word to re-trigger their password nowadays. Then that is a growing number of customers. But the growth in 2020 is really on the COVID. You see that people are getting more digitally. That's what Olaf also, not only that we are working at home more, and that provides in the internal identity and access management more strength, more emphasis, but also people are really the digital transition to doing business digitally is growing faster. There's a speed up in it, and that's for our. It's an unexpected thing with the COVID, that the digital that also more consumers are coming to your portals, are doing things, are checking things, are controlling things. I don't think it's only because they have more time. It's because people are just getting more used to the digital transformation and doing the things digitally. We also had a lot of effort of all the inactive accounts to become digitally within Aegon, and that's also where IDIN is taking a big chunk of the authentication. The interesting thing, the first, when we started, you saw that 80% of the users were using IDIN, and the last period, what you see is that now 86% is stepping in the IDIN flow instead of choosing the letter flow. I have lost the confidence that we can cut off all the letters, and that's what you see, that there is still a group of customers who was not willing to trusting it or something. It won't be zero, but our efforts are still trying to nudge the consumers to use the IDIN flow. The most interesting part, of course, is that if somebody clicks on that flow, you see that currently 82% of all the IDIN users are finishing the flow, 27% of the letter flow is only finishing that boarding procedure. So there's a success rate from IDIN compared to the success rate of a letter is much, much higher. What we see is that people are not only getting more used to how to be. I'll come up the question later. What I wanted to say is, of course, this is the basis of our business case. The business case was cutting letters. And what you see is that for us, it was not a one-off cost-cutting method. Now, every year we save a lot of letters being sent, and there's still a lot of effort to try to send less letters to our consumers, because we are providing all the data digitally. And we see that this is it's not a one-off cost cutting, it's a structural saving. And the interesting part also is that because we provide the digital ways, it's not only to the account of IDIN, but our NPS score came up from -40 to -2, which is one of the KPIs on the management board on our boarding processes. And I'm very proud, and I'm hopefully that into the next 2 3 months we passed the 0 line for this NPS measurement. It's a specific Aegon thing. So only see that there's somebody coming in. Just a second. Look at me. Sorry, I got kids who are in the kitchen. There's a secret trick. First, if people are successfully using IDIN, they are very positive on the flow. So first, we didn't want to ask them at the end of the IDIN flow because we thought it was a little bit scary and it was difficult. It was a hassle. And one of the lessons I learned is that the digital people using the digital flow are very, very positive about the flow. So also ask at the end of that customer journey, what is their, if they perceived the journey right or wrong. And currently the users of the IDIN flow are very positive about their experience at this time. And so they are much happier than when we started earlier. For us, the last part of this presentation, I want to sketch out what I thought is the most interesting part. The interesting part is also, of course, how you can APIs connect it and how you have to work with Signicat as a proxy to do everything right and how the audit trails are connected. Those are interesting part of this IDIN connection journey. But the most interesting part is that I had to solve an interesting problem. To tell you honestly, Aegon is a bank. We got approximately 600,000 Aegon Bank customers still in our books. And Aegon also operates a bank called Knap, which is a interesting, orientated, young professional bank for ZZP'ers with a very niche. And one thing, Knap is not part of IDIN. And an interesting thing is, of course, that clients of Aegon, which the Aegon Bank does not have its own bank account system, but Knap has, they are not able to use on their Aegon account their IDIN flow. And it's a secret, but the density of clients of those two banks is extremely high within a company called Aegon. There are a lot of people within my colleagues who have a Knap account. And to make an estimation, I think nearly half of Knap accounts is owned by somebody within Aegon. So when we started, we had a problem that all internal employees with a Knap account could not use the IDIN flow. And especially somebody who was at the steering wheel on the higher management table, they had some skeptical view on why are we doing this? Why is it that two competitors that we are paying the Rabobank for something we should do by ourselves? And there's of course more of discussions going on. So why pay your competitor for something you should have by yourself? Why provide them sensitive data? They know that people are logging in at Aegon and doing things, and why make yourself strategically dependent on your competitor? Because if you see that right now 85% of your boarding flow is going by IDIN, we are attached. We are bonded together in a certain way. In the early days, and very much in those days, the unknown brand IDIN, why should we do that? And at that time we were working together with working together with Signicat, which was some kind of Nordic proxy thing with identities, how to explain it on the management board. that took me quite a while to convince everybody that this was the new modern way of doing business. That if you were not able to provide to check these attributes on a trusted base, we had to spend a lot of money to get our data, for example, in the right order. So we started, of course, and that's still the case. We started as an MVP. Let's see if it works. And the current status of the IDIN project is still an MVP, but let's face it, it works because the business case overall is very positive, and and money talks, of course. If you see that it's solving a big problem, and it provides a digital client flow which is far more easier to use. The main success I had. Sorry. Yeah, it's work environment. The main success, even for me, was not the business case. The main success for me was I was sitting in our telephone, in our help desk, where somebody gets someone at the phone. Oh, I cannot enter my Aegon. And in the early days, they had to say, well, fill in the form and you get a letter, blah, blah, blah. And now he was able to, if you have your IDIN with you, you can go in smoothly within 2 seconds, and then I can help you. And I was sitting beside that guy who was taking up the phone. And the moment that somebody used the IDIN and he was into my Aegon within 1 minute, and he could help that client out, that was such a positive experience. And that was also for the internal agents of our help desk, one of the eye openers, that they had a mean to lead the client to their My Aegon account within minutes, within a half a minute, and they could help out the customers. So IDIN solved also an interesting. A lot of agents were very happy that we provided them a way to allow the customer in a short way. Hey, here is collaboration. I see my only typo. We missed them, Olaf. But the interesting thing is that we came out with a collaboration with Rabobank, with a proxy in the middle called Signicat. And that's a way of doing business. It's a new way of helping the digital transition. And my vision is that, and I'll come to it later, but we as Aegon cannot do everything on our own. We have to find partners to get those fundamental issues surrounding, for example, identity solved if we cannot solve them by ourselves. Was it all Hosanna? Yes, as you can see from this speech, everything seems to be beautifully and easy. Now, I'm not talking about all those interesting complications to get things running and working. That went reasonably smoothly. I can, to be honest, the last 4 years, I think we had 2 or 3 incidents that some services were not working anymore, mainly that works all smoothly. But we have still a problem, because what happens if somebody fails, if we fail to match the data from our base with the data of IDIN, then the customer falls out and we still have a problem. And that's a lot of people are still experiencing that. And finally, we can only solve it. What happens at Aegon? You have a pension and you don't look at it for 10 years, and then you come back and you've been moving from Zandvoort to Spijkenisse. And if the address doesn't match, then you have a problem and you cannot get in. So the next step, what we will do to improve, the only flaws at the end of the IDIN flow is to enter some way of verification, perhaps by a the authentication should be more severe with a passport or rijbewijs. That people can change their address into the attributes provided by IDIN after already been going through the circle. So we have still a problem there, which probably can be solved by a more strict identification, but the things are still rolling there within Aegon. Coming back to working together on identities and with schemes, with the service provider, blah, 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 the whole circle, the whole ecosystem of things happening in the identity world. What you see is that many, I come to the question later, many of the companies cannot afford independently to pay for the identity and security developments needed right now. Even a company like Aegon has not got the budget to cope with all the, let's call it, security issues surrounding identity. And that's mainly because also what you see that we experienced it last year, the professionality of evil hackers is growing so fast that you have to take measures which are costly often, innovative often, and client unfriendly often. And my conclusion is that cooperation on different fields and including working together with competitors will arise on certain points. And the main good thing, of course, let's not invent different wheels twice. Why should we create our own identity ecosystem while you could create that together? I'm just knowing where exactly every ball, every tie, every knot will fall, but it won't surprise me if, for example, in the insurance business, there will be some kind of independent authentication hub providing services to the different financial, smaller financial providers, financial companies. And I think the way we are working together with IDIN is one of the first, collaborations in financial services on that point in a certain way. But let's see what happened. I don't know the future. I only see my budget decreasing and the efforts on security, but also on confirmation of identity, consent, all kinds of things, but also the scene controlling, the loggings, all the complexity of the whole world is growing. And I don't think that we as an insurance company should focus on what we're good at. And I think identity will be some kind of new industry. I've been talking for 35 minutes now, Olaf.
It's enough.
It's enough. There were some questions. First, and then see the conversation. Will Knap join Marijn? I don't know how the operations are currently. Knap, of course, has started as a bank, but this is already 10 years ago, but it's not part of the card table. And I know that they are wanting to join the IDIN community, but how it exactly will be effectuated, it's not on my table, of course, and it's still one kind of a bummer because when you have a very successful program and your colleagues cannot tell the story that it's so good because they cannot enter it, it's still some kind of nasty thing to explain always. Esther, what we see is that people are not only getting more used to being able to do this, but also including adding demands to what they can do online and how easy they can do it. Is that something you notice as well? First, what we noticed is really a change in the security that consumers shifted from That's lastig. It's not an easy thing what we are doing until I want to make sure that my data or that my things are secure. And they accept also, for example, multi-factor things. We introduced on our general account multi-factor last November. And what you see is that more than 50% of our users switched on, because it's a voluntary principle, the 2FA. So you see with the consumer that they have accepted that you need some kind of security measurements before, and that from I don't want it to I want it, because that's the difference the last couple of years. And
I'm sorry, can I
Yeah?
clarify that question? Because it's not about usability, but what we are noticing is that, at first people are really happy that, oh wow, I can do all this stuff online, or I can access you online, where, before I had to write a letter or fill out a form. But then they start, being more demanding, saying, okay, so I can do this part of my insurance online. Why can't I do that part online? Or why can't I get my full profile or my full dossier online?
Yeah.
So they have increasing demands to your information access and data stores. Is that something you're noticing as well?
And the thing is that they also take it for granted that it should be there.
Yeah, everything.
And I think the earlier Aegon strategy was to provide all data to the customer, and so we have created one place where everything is in a data lake where everything is stored. But what you see is not only the information, it's also about the demanding the next step processes. So, for example, people are asking, I want to share my account with, and suddenly you have to think about how are you sharing the information not only with your husband, but also with, for example, an independent advisor. Instead of the marketing plan to do that, it's now the consumer who is demanding it. So
exactly, they're actively, anything you show, they'll come back with a question. But now, can I do this with it?
Yeah, and especially what we are concerning right now is it's this not disabled, when people are not allowed anymore to do the financial thing, how to share and how to put consent in it, and they're really demanding for it. So the family from somebody, blah blah blah. Yeah, that's an interesting new that it's in Dutch is rupsje nooit genoeg. You're not providing anything that will be. You think that you're there by providing only the information, but you're not there yet. You have to provide also some processes which are around it. And that's the interesting part of the work, I think.
Okay. We do have a little bit time for one last question, which is asked by Marike. It's about postponed wet digitale overheid, who has been postponed. It impacts IDIN, and does it impact also your growth in any way, and why?
Marike, how do you think postponed would impacts IDIN? Yeah, for us, the impact on the digitale overheid was the reason to get started with DigiD. And for me, because it was very troublesome to do that, because we had to separate something we integrated earlier. And what you see is that you cannot explain to consumers what's the difference between IDIN and DigiD. Nobody, a consumer doesn't understand it.